Welcome back to Yoga Insider Podcast. I'm your host, Alex Waycott. It is so nice to be back in the recording studio. I just returned from a week spent in the desert where I got married really close to Joshua Tree National Park. And it was so much fun. We did an elopement, which has been planned for a long time. My partner and I just felt like elopement was the right choice for us. And we went down to Southern California with a really good friend of mine who was our wedding photographer. And the three of us just had so much fun. All of us are Tauruses, if you're into astrology. And we all love like good food, good coffee, and good shopping. And I feel like the desert really provided for us. And we were just like vibing the whole time. So we had our wedding ceremony. It was so beautiful. And we went and explored some parts of Joshua Tree National Park. And I wasn't quite sure how that would go because of the current government shutdown in the US right now. Some of the national parks aren't open or it's kind of tricky to access. But it was funny because Joshua Tree was still open and accessible for the public. And typically when you enter a national park in the US, you have to pay a fee. But when we went through the little toll booth to enter, the park rangers were it's on us. You don't have to pay anything. So I guess as part of the shutdown, they're letting people enter the park for free. So that was kind of funny. And just such a cool place. The energy down there is so special. And I would love to run a yoga retreat down in that area one day. If you like that kind of dry, hot, deserty climate, it's just a really, really fun place. So anyways, I still feel like I'm kind of in that little bubble. It was just such a great trip and I can't wait to go back. And every time I travel, I feel reflective. I don't know, something about flying on airplanes. I always have lots of different ideas when I'm in the air. And I was reflecting on my teaching journey. And also when we were in Joshua Tree, Yoga Insider Podcast hit a milestone and we reached 250 downloads of the podcast. We've actually surpassed that by quite a bit now. So thank you so much for listening. We have listeners in 10 different countries as of today. And our next goal is to reach 500 downloads. So I think that's going to come sooner than later. And if you have a yoga teacher friend that hasn't listened to Yoga Insider yet, you should definitely send an episode over to them. But yeah, that was really exciting. And I was reflecting, on my teaching journey and also kind of looking through some of the episodes that I've put out so far. And one of the episodes that has a lot of downloads is one of the first episodes that I put out, which is 13 lessons from 13 years of teaching yoga. So that tells me that was something that was interesting to you. And I kind of got thinking, and I felt like it would be fun to reflect on and share some of the things that I might do differently if I could go back in time and speak to my new yoga teacher self, or even just what I would suggest if I was talking to a yoga teacher who was just kind of starting out in their teaching career. And when I think about these reflections, it is not from a place of regret or anything like that, but it's more like the wisdom that you gain over time, right? Through trial and error. And from that place, you're able to look back and say, oh, if I knew better, if I knew differently, I would maybe do a couple of things differently. So yeah, in today's episode, take what resonates, leave what doesn't. And if you are just starting out, maybe something here will help you find your footing a little bit faster than I was able to. And so the first little tidbit that I want to share with you is just a practical one. And the first thing that I would do is start an email newsletter immediately. Like right away from day one, I would start collecting email addresses and I would send out a very simple monthly newsletter every month just to get into the practice of doing it and just to start to nurture that email list. Even if you feel like you don't have anything big and exciting to announce, like just dropping in once a month, a little hello, a little update on what's been going on for you lately can go a long way. And I've learned that that can be a really wonderful touch point to have with your students, even if your email list is really small. If you use social media in any form to market your classes or your offerings, you probably understand how fickle social media can be sometimes. And that feeling of like always trying to keep up with changing algorithms. You know, sometimes like Instagram goes down or your account gets hacked. And like there's all of these things that we can't control. And at the end of the day, we don't own our followers on social media. So any of those, you know, social media like outlets that you use, they could just disappear overnight and you could lose all your followers that maybe you've spent, you know, years and years building up. And that would definitely be devastating. And so the difference with an email list is like you own your contacts. And so even if something does happen with social media, you're usually a little bit safer to be able to get in touch with people through email. I also feel like with social media, even though it can be like an amazing tool for making connections, you don't always reach the audience that you want to reach, right? You don't always like get the message out to your ideal client through social media. And in the past, I've run like sponsored ads before, and I don't run them anymore because I've never had any luck with them. But whenever I would run sponsored ads for like a yoga workshop or a training, I would always end up getting this huge influx of like foot fetish followers from like Ontario, Canada. I don't know why. I think part of it is because a lot of like the yoga asana photos that I take and share have bare feet. But I would get like 100 new followers and it would be all these like foot fetish accounts. And, you know, unfortunately, that is not like the client that I'm trying to market my yoga classes to. It's like, it's not a foot fetish account in Ontario. It's usually like people in Vancouver, BC. So, you know, just like a funny example, but like the difference with an email list is you have a bit more control over it. And, you know, typically the people that have signed up for it are people who genuinely want to read your emails and know what you're up to. And what's cool about that is even though it can take a really long time to build up a solid email list, is that eventually you can get to the point where you are able to sell like workshops and offerings directly through email. And I've had a lot of success with that. And I find that it's a really big time and energy saver for me, where sometimes I'll, you know, just put my offering out there with one email. And if it sells out, then I save myself having to go through a whole, you know, social media marketing campaign and having to create all of the assets and, you know, all the other things that go along with it. So, you know, it definitely saves time. It positions you as a professional. And unfortunately, I've seen too many yoga studios and gyms close down, you know, overnight without warning. And when that happens, the teachers who have built community in those spaces often lose that connection with their students, and everybody can end up feeling kind of like, I don't know, disjointed afterwards, or they don't know how to find each other. And so just by having your own email list in place, that does help ensure that if something was to happen, that you would be able to kind of take your community with you and let them know, you know, where you are, where you're at, where you're going to be teaching. And so, yeah, start your newsletter early, even if it feels a little bit silly and like you're just sending an email out about the one class that you teach to like 5 people, just get into the practice of doing it, because I think that that is something that you're really, really going to want to have in place. And looking back, I wish that I hadn't waited so long to start an email list. I had to kind of learn the hard way and go through the process of, having like multiple studios kind of close overnight and things like that, to be like, oh, I wish I had a way to, be in touch with those students that I built a relationship with. The second thing that I would do differently is I would be a lot more protective of where I invest my energy and my expertise. And I think that I would give less of my time to other people's businesses, and I would take more of that energy and put it into building something for myself. So, in the past, I feel like I've given a lot of myself to other people's projects and ideas. And I used to always say yes to like every coffee date and every invitation to have my brain picked, which I'm not a fan of. And, I wanted to be helpful, and like, I'm really passionate about what I do. I love talking about yoga. And if somebody says like, hey, can I pick your brain? And, can we talk about yoga? Like, first of all, that's super flattering that someone wants to pick your brain. And like, I always want to talk about yoga. But I think what I realized, again, after having many of those like pick your brain sessions with people, is that not everybody values your time. Not everybody is transparent about like what they're looking for or why they want to pick your brain. And there are absolutely people out there who genuinely want mentorship, and they genuinely respect you and want to learn from you. And typically those people also want to pay for your time and your expertise. And then there's also people out there who just want free consulting. And so I think I've learned to become a lot more discerning. And if somebody does genuinely want to work with me, like, that's awesome. And I have trainings and workshops and mentorship options and consultation options. But I don't let just anyone, like, quote unquote, pick my brain anymore. So yeah, that's something that I would just look out for. And, I've also been in situations where I've done work for like shockingly low pay, and where, I was doing like really highly skilled work for shockingly low pay within the yoga industry. And that can be like a hard lesson to learn, when it comes to like putting your boundaries in place and finding that balance between saying yes to things and saying yes to opportunities, right? Because like we all have to do our time, but also, learning to protect our energy. And so I definitely protect my energy more fiercely these days. And, I think sometimes it's also like maybe feels easier to like give our time and energy to other people. And maybe we think that like we're not worthy of that same investment in ourselves. But if I could go back and talk to, my past yoga teacher self, I would say like, stop giving so much to other people's businesses for minimum wage and put that energy into, building something for yourself sooner. Okay. Next idea, and this is a really big one, is if I could go back, I would give myself permission to see teaching yoga as a real and viable career path. So I always knew that I wanted to be a yoga teacher from a very, very young age. Like from the age of 5, there was a deep knowing inside of me that I was going to teach yoga, and that's something that I was going to do. And at the same time, I also had this feeling, or like maybe it's more like a belief, that teaching yoga was only ever something that I would be able to do on the side. And that in order to be respected and considered successful, like in society, that I needed to have a more serious or like traditional career alongside teaching yoga in order to matter. Okay. And I spent a lot of years like overachieving. I am your classic, like, recovering gifted student. I spent a lot of time overachieving and, getting degrees and certifications and like not in yoga. And like interning and working different jobs and volunteering and like stacking my credentials so that I would look really good on paper so that I could get this magical, quote unquote, like traditional career that would make me important, that would make me matter. And I don't know, it's interesting to reflect on why I felt like that. I think that there's lots of different reasons. But I remember like when I had just graduated from university, so again, I'd already been teaching yoga for quite a few years. I graduated with my bachelor's degree, and then I took like a year gap year before being able to start my master's program. And in that gap year, and I feel like gap years are meant to be fun, by the way, but I moved to the UK. I got a work visa. I moved to Manchester, and I decided that like I was going to use that gap year to get some more professional experience on my resume. And it's like so funny when I reflect back on it. So I moved to Manchester, and like I moved there without a job. I did not have work lined up. I just had this work visa. And so I was obviously on the job hunt. But I had my priorities straight in some respect. And like I found a yoga studio to attend as a student. And it was like a little kind of mom and pop, like independently owned Jivamukti studio. And the owners were so sweet. And I remember going there and they were like, oh my gosh, we can't believe that like a young girl like you, I was like 23 years old at the time, would move across the world and, not even have a job lined up. Like, you're so brave. And I didn't think anything of it. And they were like, you can teach yoga at our studio. And I didn't really take them up on it because I was just so focused on getting this like professional job that I thought that I needed to have. And, the job hunt took a little while. I think it took me, maybe a month or so to find a full-time job. But during that process, I remember the owners of this studio, like they were looking out for me. They phoned me and they were like, hey, like, we know you didn't ask us to do this, but we know like the management of the Lululemon store here in Manchester. And like, we can get you a job working at Lululemon. And so you could work full-time at Lululemon, and then you could also teach yoga at our studio. And I was like, no. I was like, no, I don't want to do that. Like, I need to do something more professional to, build up my resume. And like, looking back, I just think that's so hilarious because I ended up taking this shitty like analyst job working for this huge transportation company. And it was in this really dingy office, and it was kind of miserable. And like, I was a young girl in my 20s. I probably would have had way more fun and like met more like-minded people if I had worked at Lululemon and taught yoga at that studio. Like, it probably would have been way better. But, I was just holding on to this internalized belief that I had that teaching yoga wasn't enough and that it wasn't a place where I could, I don't know, like maybe it's like an ego thing, but where I could like showcase my intelligence and like professionalism. And I just felt like nobody would take me serious in life if I was just a yoga teacher. And it was quite a few years after that where I finally allowed myself to take it seriously. Like I finally gave myself permission to see teaching yoga as a viable career and something that I could do, be taken seriously, make money at, and like see as a real business. And so if you're listening and you're wondering like if yoga can be a full-time thing for you, I think it absolutely can. But the first thing you have to do is like give yourself permission to see it as something more than just a side gig or just a side hustle. Because if that's all you see it as, then that's all it's going to be. My next little thing that I would tell my past yoga teacher self, or that, I would share with maybe a newer yoga teacher starting out, is to trust my intuition immediately. And there have been so many times, even in the last couple of years, where, an opportunity would show up and it would look pretty good on paper, but something about it just didn't feel right. And I got really good at ignoring that feeling and kind of like pushing it down because it wasn't logical. And I would always end up being proven right later on. Like my initial feelings or inklings about whatever that opportunity was or that place or that situation, like it always came true. And I would just get that gut sense sometimes, like not always, but just with certain opportunities, like, maybe this just isn't going to be a good fit for me. But I didn't want to seem, ungrateful or like I was being picky or entitled or anything like that. And so I would say yes. And I am a proponent of like saying yes to opportunities in order to, build skills and whatnot. But every single time I had that gut feeling about those situations, it would always end up that they were misaligned and that they weren't for me. And I think it just takes time and practice. And I know that this is wisdom that comes with age too, right? Where like we get better at listening to those feelings inside of ourselves and just trusting them right away rather than waiting until something bad happens or waiting until something turns messy. And I think that it's okay to say no to opportunities, even if you see that like everybody else is really excited about them. And I think that that is something that I struggle with, because there would be opportunities that would present themselves and like everybody else would be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm going to teach at this place or I get to do this thing. And everybody would be like fawning over it and super excited. And like, I'm just not like that. And I wish that I had, trusted those feelings sooner. And so if I could go back in time, I would definitely tell myself that, my intuition is giving me information and that I don't need to wait for proof anymore, that like if something feels weird, it probably is. And that would be my recommendation to like for new teachers is like, yes, say yes to opportunities, but also just like sit with them for a moment and ask yourself, does this feel aligned? Is this the right place for me? Maybe it's going to be amazing for other people, but it's just, not for you. Yeah. And okay, one more little tidbit that I'll share with you is that if I could go back and kind of like hold my own hand, I would tell myself to stay so focused on my why. So your why is like your reason for teaching. It is the thing that guides you and keeps you grounded, especially when you are moving through inevitable challenges, when you're moving through conflict, when you're moving through things that don't feel like they're going your way, and like when you're in a career, any career for a long time, there are going to be ups and downs, right? Like that's just human nature. And I think that if you can stay really connected to your purpose and really connected to your why and remind yourself of it every single day, that if you're operating from that place, you are going to be moving like through the world with integrity, rather than perhaps from like a reactive place, like reacting to things that are going on around you. And so I would tell my past yoga teacher self to not dwell so much on, things that went wrong. And yeah, like people are weird, things are going to happen. And I would just really, really stay focused on like that higher vision. And it does feel like your why for teaching like is always coming from your highest self. And I would really, really remind myself to let that be my anchor and just like keep myself focused on that and trust that everything else will fall into place. So those are the things that I would do differently, or, maybe spend more time thinking about if I was like starting over as a new yoga teacher. And, like none of us get it perfect. We all learn through trial and error and through experimentation. And that really is like how we refine our paths as yoga teachers. But looking back at what I know now, those are a few little things that I would do differently. Yeah. And I think even with, having this Yoga Insider podcast, like this is part of my why, is being able to share like real conversations with other yoga teachers around the world. I think that this is really, really important. And, just to know that like you're not alone in this teaching journey, and to be so for real, it can feel isolating sometimes. So that would be my recommendation. So if you enjoyed this episode, I would love for you to share it with another teacher who might need to hear it. And once again, I want to thank you so much for listening, so much for being here. I'll see you next time.